Oh, hey Tony, what have we got today? Oh man, I can tell you. It's just red amp here. Red, white and black with a little bit of silver in there. Now I wanted to present this amp to you some months ago, but someone said to me, hey, you can't do that yet. You've got to wait for the right time, so to speak. So here's the right time. I've been chasing this off and on for, well, months really. Should have hit the ground in November, but it didn't. I don't really know why, but that's life, isn't it? You've got to do what you're told sometimes, and yeah, I've done what I was told. So here it is. I can't wait. Oh, that's well and good, Tony, but what is it? Well, looking at this one, it's it's a Marshall 2525H, it says here. Proudly. Yeah, the 2525H, and they also make a 2525C. But this isn't any ordinary run-of-the-mill. Well, it is, but it isn't. You can't just go and walk into your local Marshall store and buy one off the shelf, I'm afraid. It's not there to buy. So what's the story? What's all this about? Well, you can see it looks different. Well, it is quite a bit of an involved story, but let me tell you where I got it from first, and we get that out of the way. This one came from Fair Deal Music in England, and their phone number and website's down below and probably at the bottom of the screen right now. Now think about Fair Deal. The reason I like to go back to Fair Deal Music is this. First of all, they listen to you. The second of all, these guys are one of the premier Marshall dealers in the UK, if not the most premier Marshall dealer. So they can sort of get to things where ordinary people can't, or the small dealers may not. So for me, somebody who's always looking for product to review, they're a really great company to communicate with and work with. Yeah, and I've never had any real problems with them. You know, you can sort of go and ask for things and, well, it appears, which is always good. You see, the thing is, the truth is, that I can go along to any Marshall dealer and buy whatever they've got. And so can you. And Fair Deal's a great place to go for that. They do literally fair deals. What more could you ask for? I think that makes sense, doesn't it? So, my friends at Fair Deal said to me, hey, we've got an amp coming. And I said, well, what's unusual about that? They said, well, nothing really, but would you like it to be, well, different? And I said, of course. That's the main reason for giving you a call, really, and asking you what you've got, type of thing. And they said, well, let me send you a form. So they sent this form. This is the story. They sent this form, and on this form you could fill out what you wanted, whether you wanted a white front, a black logo. In fact, you could specify this to almost anything that you want. And I thought, no, they won't be able to do this. Yeah, so I sent this form back, and magically, I was dealing with the PA, or the personal assistant, to the CEO of Marshall, which I thought was absolutely amazing. Anyway, went backwards and forwards 2 or 3 times while they were asking me various bits and pieces. And ultimately, they said, okay, that's it now. Don't do anything, it'll arrive. But anyway, cutting a long story short, just the other day, I went back and I said, hey, can I make the review of this now? He said, yeah, of course. So here it is. And I think at some time in the future, there might be some more amps coming out. So let's get on with this one. Let's have a look at this amp and see what it's all about. It's a really nice amp and presented so well. And substantially cheaper than some of the other amps that I reviewed. Anyway, let's get down to this one. I think what we'll do is we'll whip the chassis out, as I always do, and we'll have a real close-up look at the chassis, because, well, that's where it all starts, isn't it? Okay, well, let's get down to the chassis, take a closer look. I couldn't wait to get down to this bit, could you? I think it's always fun. You'll notice before we go anywhere, we've got this covering on the front that should be taken off, I guess, but Don't hold it against it, I'm going to leave it on for now. You can see how shiny that is behind the cover. Really, really, well, silver. A bit like a silver sort of Jubilee. We'll come back to that a little bit later, won't we? I'm sure we will. Okay, well, looking at the amp starting from this end, it seems a good place to start, bearing in mind I'm over here. We've got the usual things, and this is the power transformer. And you can see, well, it's pretty robust. It's not giant in size, but I wouldn't call it small either, would you? This one here, basically, it's called a TXMA 00193. It's an MD182-E230 volts, and it was made basically in May 2105, and it's ROSH compliant. So, nice little bit of gear. Next thing along, as you can see actually, this one's it's a choke, and it's an INDT 00023, or you can read the rest yourself. So there. So let's address the output transformer way over there, this one over here. And that one, actually, that's a TXOP-00044, and it's an MD182-OPT for output transformer, I guess, and that's also May 2105, and that's also ROSH compliant. So all three of those components were probably made at the same time, or within days. So let's get the tubes out of the way, shall we? We've got some ECC 83s here, 1, 2 and 1 under the shroud. You probably see pictures of them as I'm going. So that's the first one. Here's the second one. Well, they all look pretty much the same to me, which makes sense. Then you've got these two big ones at the back, the EL34s. Yeah, and they're well-known tubes for sure. Now all these tubes are marked up as Marshall tubes, but they might be any brand. They might be JJ, they might be any brand you want to think about, but they're marked up as Marshall tubes. And I do know that JJ are sometimes used. In fact, on this one, they are. I can see the logo from here, although you can't. Which is a pity, but that's what they are, JJ tubes. And there's only one more thing to look at up top here, and there's a little sticker down the side here. I'm just going to draw your attention to that just before we move on. Okay, well, as you can see on the screen now, the item is a 2525H-20-00. I'm not sure what some of those things are for. I could go and ask Marshall, but it doesn't really matter that much. Point is, it's a 2525H amp assembly. This one's 230 volts and 50 hertz, and then in brackets you've got AEHILS, which probably means something to Marshall. Doesn't mean anything to me, and probably not to you either. Yeah, who cares? That's the point. The serial number is M-2021, which means it was made in 2021 and week 48, and then the rest of it's to do with production line and numbers and things like that, which doesn't really matter for us at this moment in time. Does it? I don't think it does. And then lastly, we've got this thing called a work order, 354325, and I think the work order thing, it might relate to the fact that this particular amplifier is a sort of custom amp. Not necessarily on the chassis, but overall. And as I said, we'll come back again to that also a little bit later, and what that really means. And it's something that people don't often talk about. If you look at this chassis, by the way, it's got a very nice paint job on it. I just wanted to raise the point of that just before we moved on. Well, I don't know about you, but I love getting down and having a look close up on this stuff, don't you? You can really see what you're actually buying, as opposed to what you think you're buying when you're just looking at the outside of some amp that everybody tells you is great, and it may or may not necessarily be great, so to speak. It might have internal flaws, it might have internal design problems, and a whole plethora of different things, including really junky components that they don't expect you to see, or they don't want you to see, more the case with some of them, and that sort of thing. And that's one of the reasons I always have a nice close-up look inside the amp. I think it's so important. Well, it's not just the amp, is it? It's all the gear as well, all the pedals, everything that you want to think about. It doesn't really matter whether it's speakers or whatever. It's all important because any one of the things in that chain could fail. In any case, let's take a cursory look across the front from left to right, and then we'll zoom in a bit closer and have a look at some of the really important stuff. I think that's always necessary. Well, hopefully that'll be all nice and in focus as I want it to be for you. I want you to see how great this amp is inside. Or not, we'll see. So let's start from here. As you can see, there's the input at the back, down the bottom. In comes the power, through the two switches on the front, you can see them up there, and through the power transformer and off onto the board. There's your power transformer, all very, very neat. And if you look at this the sort of cabling down here, and indeed all the rest of the cabling, it's got like a sort of fishbone sort of finish on it that makes the cable exceedingly useful. Yeah, very nice looking, but it'll have an ulterior motive. There is no doubt they wouldn't spend that sort of money on cable that doesn't do a particular job. And you can see the sort of quality of that cable that's included inside this amp as standard. Nothing special there, except that when you go and look in amps that can cost twice the price, they don't have cabling like that. Because cabling can affect, all that hum. So moving along a bit further, we've got a fuse there. You can see it down at the bottom. And then we've got the main, I'll call it the main board, which is really what it is. You've got a number of fuses over this left-hand side. You can see them. They're all protecting you from inside the amp, which is a great thing. Moving along a bit, we've got a pile of capacitors. Can I call them that? Now, these capacitors are Samoa brand, and they've been in quite a few Marshall amps of late. Sort of off and on, depending on what you're looking at and where you're sort of going down to on the board. But there they are, Samoa. I haven't seen any fail, I haven't seen any problems with any of them. So I can only assume, unless they actually start giving lots of problems out there, that they're going to be fine. I haven't seen much trouble with them. The board itself, by the way, I'm looking at this board and I can't quite make out yet what it is. But I have looked a bit closer in one or two areas, and for example, there's a point over there on the screen now where you can see through plated holes. So this must be at least a double-sided PCB, and that's my opinion. You don't have through plating holes if it's single-sided. That makes sense, doesn't it? And that's nice to see, a decent board. It's pretty thick as well, this one. Yeah, it's... I couldn't say how thick, but yeah, it looks good. Moving along, we've got these usual 5 watt, 1 kilo ohm ceramic resistors. You've got your power tubes down here. You can see them down there, and they're near these sort of ceramic resistors, which is usually the case. And then we've got the preamp tubes, so we could call this section at the top basically the preamp area. There's V1, V2 and V3. Yeah, so I think we'll just zoom in a bit closer and have a quick look at this main board, this main amplifier board, and then we'll have a look at the ancillary boards below and above. You can see them, and that's also a pretty good thing to note. Now what I actually want to talk about are things like these resistors here. You can see them. There's quite a few of them, and they're bigger than some of the other resistors. You can see there's some smaller ones down there. And one thing you'll notice about these really small ones is they're actually mounted flush to the board. Can you see that? There's no gap under there. You can't get anywhere with them. But in the bigger resistors, there's this gap. Look, I can put this right straight through there. You see that? And that gap is there really to compensate from the fact that bigger resistors get hotter. So what Marshall does is they lift them off the board a little bit. Well, these are actually, there's one, two, there's one there, there's one there. There's some down there on the board. They're all at least a good half an inch or 13 millimetres off the board, which is quite amazing that they go to these lengths to actually ensure that the amp has longevity in it. Great thing to see. I've seen it on lots of Marshall amps, by the way. It isn't just this one. Now moving along a bit further, as we should. We always come back to these ceramics, don't we? These ceramic resistors. And the thing about ceramic resistors, the reason they're so big is they dissipate an awful lot of heat. Generally. Not always, but generally. And what you'll notice with these, as you can see that picture on the screen right now, this one, and this one are all lifted way off the board. Again, it's well over half an inch or 13 millimeters off the board so that they can't affect or damage the main board in any way, shape or form. I think that's a really great thing. But again, you've got more of these larger resistors actually lifted off the board. A lot of people would ignore that or not even bother to understand that, if you're making an amp, you don't want to put hot stuff bolted straight to the board, do you? As many makers do. I could name them, but I'd get hate mail. I just want to show you down here. Okay, this is the area of the preamp. And again, you can see the tubes there and these sort of little capacitors and so on and so forth. Once again, there's nothing to criticise really. It's all absolutely, well, it's pristine and it's still got that cable all down this end and over here. That quality cable that you don't just see in any old amp. I think it's awesome myself. And they're using connectors, by the way, that don't just flirt out any old time. These are actually held in place and you've got to clip them out and all that sort of stuff. So what's great about it is it's going to be robust and reliable. The cable isn't going to fall out like some amps, or like, quote, the old days. It's all moved on so far. Really great thing to see. Okay, well, another thing I wanted to show you. You can't see it from the front here where we are, but looking at it from the side, I've got a picture on the screen now, and it's showing you basically the first of the power tubes and how they're mounted on this board. The socket itself is actually mounted to the chassis, and then you've got these thin pins. You can see them here. These thin pins stick out and come through this board, and then they're soldered in position. Now I just want to draw your attention to this here. This says here, valve bases or valve base quality by J. Whoever J is, he'll know who he is. And there's another sticker down here that says ATE tested DM. What it really means is all this stuff's getting tested as it goes. It doesn't wait until the end and then they sort of bodge it together somehow. This one's all good, yeah. There's nothing that's been done later or fixed or, sometimes they have PCB modifications. I'm not talking specifically Marshall here, by the way, but they do have PCB modifications like I've seen in some amps. One that sticks in my mind is the Diesel Hagen, and that had got a modification actually on the board after the board had been fitted, and they decided that there was an infield mod, but the infield mod was actually fitted at the factory rather than being done later by a dealer or something. So, and it never looks very good, but it did work fine. It was a particularly great sounding amplifier. It's that one. We'll find out if this one is, of course, a little bit later. So there's nothing down here on this main board that concerns me or bothers me in the slightest. It's all good. And so what we'll do is we'll take a quick look at the top board here and then have a quick look at the output side afterwards and then move on. Okay, well, I'm going to move along at this quite quickly. I just want to give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the far side of the amp. First thing you'll notice is that it's all been protected when it's been sprayed on the chassis so that you've got a good grounding along here. You can see that. These potentiometers, by the way, are alpha pots, and there's a few of them on here. Some of them are, well, double, like this. They push-pull type of things. There's two of them, one there and one there. And the rest of them are fitted across the sort of, the smaller ones rather than the 1 inch or so size. And I guess they're readily available and you could fit them quite easy. They're all fitted on a main board, as you can see there. Let me see if I can go across a little bit. And the connectivity comes off from these places like this and this in these real high quality cables that we've talked about onto the main board, as you can see right there. So there's little to worry about with any of that. I'm not concerned about the pots or the quality of the pots, and it's great that they're all fitted on a separate PCB than the main board, because you can always get out of problems later on in life, even 10, 15, 20 years down the road, when they're all separate like that. I always love to see that, don't you? Okay, well, I don't know how well you can see that, but this is the power in at the back of the amp. And I wanted to just show you the cabling and how it's grounded down there. You can just about see that. And that fuse. Okay, it's all very nice. So across the back here, we've got, once again, a cleared area for good grounding. And these two boards, there's one over here and one here. As you can see, this one here is looking after all the outputs to the speakers, with one connection there, which is for the DI out. So all these are outputs. This is an output board. And on this one over here, yes, there is a loop. There's a send and return. And there's also a foot switch that goes on this one here. So send and return and foot switch on the other board. What more could you ask for? Anyway, all looks good to me. Lastly, just before we do go back up, you'll notice that there's a gap on this amp at the end. It's not filled in like some amps are. It's probably because, you know, these sort of 20 watt, 25 watts, and even the recent 5 watt amp that I reviewed, the transformers are not particularly that heavy. They're not like the old 100 watt that you can just see behind this amp over there. Them are heavy. These are sort of, well, flimsier. That's how I describe it. But they don't need to be anything else, and that's the point. I think we'll just have one more quick look across that PCB, and then we'll go round the back and then round the front. So if we just start here, you might see some of it as we slide the camera across slowly. Yeah, it all looks pretty cool to me. Not much you can say, except that, well, it's what you might expect for an amplifier. This sort of prestige and style. You know, it's not the latest, most powerful, high gain amplifier in the world. It's not designed to be. This is very much like the old Silver Jubilee, but smaller and intended to be the same, or as near as you can on what limited factors are in this particular style of amp. Well, let's move along. That's the power in. There's the serial number again, proudly. And don't forget, this has got that covering on it that protects it from, you know, damage. Okay, in there is a fuse. You can see it. There's the fuse. Okay, dependent on which voltage you're operating on. So the HT fuse there as well. We move along, we've got made in England by Marshall, and I believe it is. I don't think an amp like this is being made anywhere else except in the UK. Moving along, we've got a lot of different things, including the approvals all along the bottom. We've got a loop here, a send and return FX loop, and a foot switch that they do provide, by the way. We've got a DI out, a bit of Japanese up there, as one guy pointed out to me at some stage. And if we carry on along, you've got a good mix of output loudspeaker sockets. There they are. Yeah, all very nice. Yeah, not a lot I can say about them except it'll handle 116, 1/8 or 2/16s, 1/4 or 2/8. What more could you ask for? Let's go around the front. Okay, once again we're going to sort of quickly whiz across this. There's not a lot to see except a couple of little things that are a bit more unusual on this one than some of the other Marshall amps. Don't forget we've got that skin on there. Look at this. It's actually like a mirror. Can you see that? Incredible. Okay, so this is a Silver Jubilee model 2525H studio version, it says. But it isn't just the studio version. I don't think you can just go and buy this one off any shelf, and we'll come back to that, as I said, later on. We've got a power and an output switch, and we can have it in low output or in high output. And the output itself, Well, it can be 5 watts when set to low, and it can be 20 watts when set to high. Makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you though? Well, 5 watts being driven's good, and so is 20 watts, I guess. Quick shot here. I just want to show them. It's a presence, bass, middle and treble, and they do exactly what they do on near enough every other Marshall amp out there. Yeah, they adjust the bass, middle and treble and the presence. Okay, well, one of the most important bits is this output master. And the thing about the output master, it adjusts the output of the preamp section into the power amp section. Pretty obvious if you think about it. It's like most other master outputs. But the lead channel can be selected with its foot switch, but it can also be selected here. So if you pull this out, that's the lead channel, or not. Yeah, it could be the other way around. We'll see that later on, anyway. Yeah, it can also be switched with the pull switch, as I said. The amount of gain that gets applied to the lead channel is controlled using the input gain control, this one over here. You can see I've had it on full. I'm on that. Yeah, you just have to put up with that. So you've got a lead master and you've got an input gain. So when you've got the lead channel active, this adjusts the lead channel, well, volume, for want of a better phrase. So we can balance between the standard channel and the lead channel. Now lastly, you can see over here, there's this input gain that we've talked about. But again, you can see it says there, pull rhythm clip. And if we take this and we pull it out, you can actually increase the gain of the input. Yeah. So it's a fine balancing act between this one, and this one to get what you're really looking for, whether it's in the rhythm channel or in the lead channel or what have you. Pretty much unique, not totally unique, but pretty much unique to the sort of 25, well, to the Silver Jubilee series. Let's rephrase that. And yeah, there it is. All good. And of course, you've got the input at the end, which I think most people are familiar with. Okay then, well, in 1987, the original Silver Jubilee came to life, so to speak. And the casing of those, in case somebody hasn't seen them, most people have, but new guitarists won't have, so it's quite important to cover it just the same. They had a sort of silver covering over them. They're unmistakable when you see them in real life. And they were developed to create 25 years of making Marshall amps and 50 years of Jim Marshall being in business, which is a long time. 50 years that he was in the music business, that is. If you took the Marshall, the 2203 and the 2204, and you did a mod job on them, as is often the case with Marshall amps these days or derivatives, you'd end up with one of these, and that's exactly what Marshall did. Yeah. Well, the 255 came out in about 1987, and it was the end of the 80s, and that's what they created, and there was no going back, so to speak. And the 2555, the Silver Jubilee, was an immediate hit. People like Guns N' Roses, you know, and those sort of people, and later people like Bonamassa and many, many others moved into using the 2555 in a big way, and that's generally how they got their sound. So if you're a Guns N' Roses fanatic, you want a 2555, or at least that's the plan. And one of the things about those 2555s of the time was that they had a decent channel switch, which on the earlier amps didn't exist. Well, not really. So that was a main feature, and they also had a thing called a pentode stroke triode preamp flip for different output power. Yeah, that was also pretty revolutionary at the time. And you know, the 2555, it always liked to see on the end of its speaker connections vintage 30 speakers from Celestion. And I've got a few of them in the studio, and It always sounds better on them rather than some of the other ones that I could mention. So if you do end up with an original 2555 or the 2555X, which I have also reviewed, and that will be down in the text, you can go and have a look at one of them, the real reissue, or whether it's this one, those are the sort of speakers that you really should be looking for. Now earlier I was talking about that bass, middle and treble and presence and saying, oh, it's just like all the others, but the truth is, well, I was lying. The fact is that the EQ section on the 2555 series, and indeed even to this one to this day, it departs where most of the others had gone in the time. And yeah, that's in a good way. So you can imagine this EQ section giving you nice sparkling cleans, but it can also give you, believe it or not, the driven rhythms that detuned even, if you wanted to do that, on some of the most searing guitar leads out there. So it's an amp that can be used for many, many different styles. And I guess that's why some of those famous guitarists, the likes of the Bonamassa of this world, the blues guy, different blues guys, and all sorts of other people clung on to that amp, the 2555 series. And remember that the 2525 here is derived from that amp. There's no ifs or buts about that. As soon as you plug this thing in, you, my friend, are going to know the tone. You've heard it 1,000 times. This amp in the UK today, not this one, but the general 2525 Studio, is available in its sort of silvery colour. And I've got it written down here for this one. If you get the combo, it's £879, which is probably an equivalent to about $1,150, give or take. And the head is £759. So, yeah, it's not the cheapest in the world, but as far as the Studio series go, it's about right, and it's about where most of the other Studio series amps reside. This one, on the other hand, is another story. Now, the fact is that I intentionally set out with that form that I filled in, and I was telling you about earlier, to make an amplifier that looked like no other that I've ever seen. And I think you'll probably agree that this amp is not the same as any other amp that you've ever seen, actually. Sure, the chassis is pretty standard, I guess, but there's far more to an amp than just a chassis, you know. One of the things that you always should consider, whether you do or you don't, it's another story, but, you know, musicians, really, they're showmen, aren't they? No, not showmen. They've got sheep, haven't they? Showmen. Yeah, the showmen of this world want an amp that's going to stand out and look great, because the looks do matter. Well, partly why you buy a Marshall, isn't it? It's great. Yeah, so when you can take an amp like this, made by Marshall, and fully customised to whatever you want it to look like, I think that's a really good thing. And I don't know many manufacturers that'll do that for you just at the snap of a finger. I can't be sure they'll actually do this for you, but I do know that there is a form that you can fill out and you can fill it in, and you know, you send it off, from what I gather, and you can get it customised, probably. I don't think I'm any exception to the rule, and I'm nothing special. I'm just an ordinary guy like everyone else, well, except for the owl up here and his mate over there. So how great did it really come? It was fantastic. It was absolutely perfect and exactly to the specifications that I filled out on that little form. Now, while we're on the subject of things that matter, have you subscribed? Because these videos cost me an arm and a leg to make. They really do. You never really get your money back out of YouTube. Well, at least I don't. My incentive isn't to make money, really. I do want to build up the subscribers, though, because making videos, if nobody watches them, is pretty useless. So you need to subscribe. You need to do one of them thumbs up. You ring the bell, and you'll see. Choose all for notifications, because if you don't, Well, you're one of the 95% of subscribers who will never see a notification about the next video. And it could be one of these. It could be something better than this. Who knows what Marshall or any other amp company's got up their sleeve. Well, I haven't got a sleeve, but you'll get the idea. By the way, you do actually get, with the head, that is, a speaker cable. No, it's not for your guitar. It's a speaker cable. And you do get a mains cable that's suitable for your country, as well as the 3-year warranty and some sort of manual and bits and pieces in there. It's all good. Yeah, you've all seen that before though, haven't you? And hey guys, one thing, you know, I like to make these videos for people that don't have the ability to just go along to one of these amps and just open it up and show you what I'm showing you. It's so important to me to do that, that if I couldn't do that for some obscure reason, I wouldn't make videos. Every man and the dog does all the rest of it, and I don't do that. I'm very alien to most of these, quote, channels that are on YouTube. I tend to show you what I really do think has relevance, like the warranty, like the components inside, like the build quality, like the experience from Fair Deal Music. Like I said, great guys. I've never had a problem with them, and I've bought a number of amps from them. By the way, I always buy the product. Everything you see in this video is bought by me, whether it's this amp behind me, whether it's this Roland Boss thingy over there, whether it's the amp behind this one, Mesa Barbara, all of it. It's all purchased. So you're always going to get a true review, not some concocted sales video, but that's its only role in life. And I'm certainly no dealer. Dealer will say, yeah, this is great. So, to the summing up. Well, the Marshall 2525H is like similar to a 2555X, I'll call it, because that was a reissue. And I did review that a while ago. So always check down in the text below, because I'll have links to that review and things like that. And that was a full-blown Silver Surfer, I'll call it that, 100-watt amp from Marshall. And that was particularly nice as well. Anyway, this is the 2525, 20-watt or 5-watt in these fabulous colours. We'll come to that. And yeah, does it sound how I think it'd sound? Does it sound how you'd think it'd sound? I'm afraid it does. Of course, my playing and my style may not be its playing and its style, but there's plenty of people that demonstrate this sort of equipment out there. So how would I sum up further? I can't find a single thing wrong with this damn thing. It's perfect. It arrived a couple of weeks later than it should have, but that's okay. I understand the problems. I'm sure you guys do with what's going on in the world today. So it's faultless. It's faultless internally. It's faultless externally. The prices are great for this sort of gear, particularly in England. I can't vouch for the USA, I'm sorry. I'd love to be able to tell you what this would cost in the USA. In fact, I might try and get that info out of Marshall. Who knows? So I'm going to give this one. This gets a 10 out of 10. There's no ifs, no buts, no ahs, no, oh, somebody's been inside and burnt it up or botched it or done whatever they do. And the deal was absolutely perfect. The whole experience is 1,000% different than some of the other stuff I've reviewed. This is as good as it gets. Don't let anybody convince you that it's not this, it's not that. Pay no attention to them. I'm telling you, if this is how I say it is, and you mark my words it is, it's probably one of the best amps you can buy. Obviously, you've got to like the style of the amp. It's no use coming here and doing death metal on a 20-watt Marshall 2525 amp. It's not designed for that. I don't think you'd get away with that. Even the guys I know couldn't get away with that. But if you play everything else, wow, great product. So it's a 10 out of 10. No ifs, no buts and no ahs. There's little else I could say about it, is there? I mean, how good does it have to be? When it gets this good, it makes my job of making a review pretty redundant, other than saying, look at this, look at that, look at the other. Oh my God, look at this. Well, you've heard enough from me now, haven't you? I can't cover anything else on this amp. I even like the gold on the handles and things like that. It's a completely unique amp. You know the thing about when you're out there on stage and the rest of it, I'm much older than I used to be, but I used to do that too. When you're on stage, everything matters. So what's next? Well, there's very little left now except to say I'm going to be plugging it in, and coming up anytime soon will be the the playing. What I play, who knows what I play? Depends so much these days on different things that I'm doing at the time, if you want the truth. And if you do like genuine, real reviews, not sponsored by anybody except, well, Tony Mackenzie, I even paid for this. Yeah, well, then you're looking at the right channel, because the other channels don't do what I do. Never have, never will. And if they do, they're just copycats. So there. And don't forget to go to www.tonymackenzie.com, where I've got a website full of reviews, and my YouTube channel has well over 360 reviews in total so far. Yeah, that's how I've ended up being as old as I am. Crazy. I've been doing this stuff since about 2009, I think. Give or take. Yeah, scary. The music's coming up next, and there's nothing else to say except get out of here. Okay, well, we've got some clean tones here, and yeah, they're clean. Even with this guitar, that's usually pretty heavy. Now when you push this in, this takes it to the lead channel, but when it's out as it is, it's very clean. You've also got lots of effects. I'll say effects because the bass, middle, treble and presence aren't like most of the older amps. You know, they look the same, but they're not. If you look at the bass, for example, or the middle. You could drop that out and bring that two up. So if we pull out this input gain, you get a bit more gain, a bit more crunchy. Of course, you've got to mess around with it a bit. Yeah, the treble's back and that sort of thing. Well, basically all them tones are in there. Just depends what you want. Push that back in, you get a bit less, but push that one in, you get a lot more. a massive tone variance purely with these EQs, which isn't something you usually got on the older stuff. Anyway, enough of this. That's a few of the tones that you can get out. So I've just got a sort of backing track that you can listen to. Yeah.